Welcome to Prime Time. Today we're going to be going over employee maintenance in Genesis and TA100Pro. Both applications are basically the same, although Genesis has more detail in it and added options that TA100 does not have. For our purposes, though, it will be able to show how an employee is maintained through both. So we're going to click on the Employee button, and that will bring up our employees, of course. And the first thing is, what if I need to make someone inactive, or I need to change their pay policy, or move them from full-time to part-time, or something like that? So we can come down here and select our employee that we want to inactivate. And the status tab up here is what we want to click on. I can see this person has one status, policy 1, active. Full-time is no, which means they're part-time and permanent. Maybe we want to make them full-time, so we click Add. They're full-time, permanent, still active. There's only one pay policy here, so I click OK. So from this point up until the 1st of December, this employee is considered part-time. Moving forward, the 2nd of December, until we make another change, this employee would be considered full-time. Now, this affects things like here, maybe I want to show full-time selection. So maybe I want to say full-time no, then only my part-time people will show up. I can do the same with the permanent as well. So that's kind of where that comes into play. It'll also come into play when running reports, because you have the option of selecting full-time or just part-time or both. And this little switch right here determines what results you'll get when that report is run. Now, to inactivate somebody, again, we're going to click Add. We don't want to edit a status that we've put in unless we screwed up on one of these three items: the pay policy, permanent, temporary, full, or part-time. And we can come in and edit and correct that. Any changes we make are going to be assumed to be from this date. So if you're just making them part-time, you would actually need to click Add, put the date they became part-time, and you would have another status. And you begin to build a history. March 1st, 2002, active, full-time, permanent. On the 16th of April, 2007, he was inactive and reactivated on 2/20/2022. So that's how this works in here. Come back to our tester, and I'm going to go ahead and click Add, and we'll just put a date. And we're going to choose inactive right here. I'm not worried about any of these. He was already full-time, permanent, and policy 1 before, so that's fine on his inactive status. I click OK, and I can see his stuff disappeared, and that's because I don't have Show Inactives checked. We can see that he's gone from my list. So be careful when inactivating somebody without the Show Inactives. You may think that it didn't take or something happened, and you may want to go and add another one. Well, if you're not paying attention to the employee you're adding it for, you could inadvertently inactivate another employee. So that's an issue you want to be wary of. If I want to reactivate an inactive employee, I can click Show Inactives. I can go to Name, find somebody here. I can see the asterisk. They're inactive if they have asterisks next to them. We see it's inactive. I can click Add. Put a date, active. Maybe he's coming back part-time. Click OK. There's my new status. And you begin to see a history of that employee coming and going, or being full-time, part-time, things like that. The asterisk is removed. I uncheck this, and they're now showing up in my active employee list. If you don't want all these separators or don't need them, you can click on this little arrow and deselect the different items, and that'll move that out of your way. If you want to expand this, because as you can see, there's only so much room for employee names, you can click here on this little arrow, and now that widens this up for us. So that's how you make someone active or inactive or change their status. And again, that's with their status tab. But you want to add a new employee. It's always going to be on the Details tab. It doesn't matter which employee you've selected. We want to go to the Details tab. On the Details tab is where we can see our ad. You'll want to note whether you have addresses in here, socials, birth dates, phone numbers, email addresses, things like that. You may not need that information, and it may not be listed on your other employees. Purely up to you. If it's not listed for other employees, if you want to put it on there moving forward, then again, that's up to you. You'll be able to do what you want as far as that goes. So I'm going to add a new employee, and I'm going to click Add. Brings me up to a blank slate. The number is going to be their payroll ID. And then if you add this in, many people don't. Birthday, again, that's up to you. You can run a birthday list or be able to know when they're celebrating their birthday for days off or something like that. Last name is important. Now, the one thing I would recommend is using caps on the last name and first name. If we look over to the left, we can see how easy it is to pick out the different employees in caps, but then when we go and see the ones not in caps, it makes it a little more difficult. Again, it's a personal thing, it's up to you. First name. And the address, of course, is up to you whether you put that in. It's not required. Neither is the phone number, the zip code, city, or email address. But if you do have their email address in here, when running reports, you do have the option to email employees their time card or other reports that pertain to them. Their hire date right here is important. This needs to be at least the day they began work, began clocking into the clock, or prior. Sometimes the employee is not added to the software till after the fact. This is forgotten to be changed. You'll notice it came up. This is today's date. And if I add that in and he began punching 3 days ago, those punches would not go into the time card because technically he was not active at that time. So you'll want to make sure that the hire date in here is correct. Fiscal, if you're using benefit entitlements and not accruals, a fiscal date in here will reset the information that comes in for the benefits. And by benefits, that's vacation, personal, sick, things like that. So if my fiscal date is July 6th, or let's say it's January 1st, anytime I give them personal, sick, or vacation, it's going to subtract it. And it's going to keep a running total of that, even though it would be in a negative balance. Or if I went into their benefits tab and just added each year a balance, it's going to subtract to that. At the first of the year or this fiscal date, it's going to wipe everything out and start from zeros again. So if you want, something like that to be able to track, and maybe you do it by hire date, then you would make the hire date and the fiscal date the same. If it's all changed on January 1st as a company or July 1st, then you would make their fiscal date that. If you're not interested in that or utilizing that, the fiscal doesn't really matter. License, spouse, license to, and these fields are for your use that you can add things into to refer to for the employee. You'll want to make sure they're in the right division if you have more than one. You'll want to make sure that they're put in the right group if you are utilizing groups. Usually all holidays is what everybody is set to. If you have multiple groups, you'll need to put them in the group that they belong. Unless you have benefit accruals in your software, this will be grayed out. Occurrence is only available in Genesis. The web clock is only available in Genesis. The ADP file number, if you do use ADP for payroll, you would place the employee's file number in here. That could be different from this number, but typically most are going to make this the same. If the employee started, you were already using ADP, then this number would likely be 0125. Which already belongs to somebody in here. But this is going to be their ADP employee ID for payroll. You have the comments here in both TA100 and Genesis. You can insert a note. And close it, and you can keep track of those. Anytime you can come back and add to this or review it. Genesis has the ability to drop pictures in a certain directory so that a picture associated with the employee number would show up for you here. Genesis also has additional stuff for web clock to be able to select here. Now, before you add an employee, again, you can look and see how they're set up and be able to copy that and choose how you want to do this. Both TA100 and Genesis has the ability to have PC clock, although it is an extra module. If you don't have that module, then even selecting it's not going to enable them to be able to use a PC clock. So we're finished right now with what we needed to put in this main screen. When I click OK down here at the bottom, I'm going to have these tabs pop up information for me to fill out or ignore as I go. So I click OK. The first one should be my status tab, which is going to have me verify full-time, permanent, and whatnot. I'm going to click OK now, and there's my status. This is giving me the opportunity to review the information that's in here. I can click Edit, and maybe this person is going to be a part-time. Maybe I've got a part-time pay policy that I need to select also. So at this time, I can fix these three things. If I'm looking at this and I realize I've made an incorrect date, I could add another one with the correct hire date and whatever I need in here, and then save it, and then delete the inaccurate one. Normally, you're simply going to be in here just changing these, or if they're good, they're full-time anyways, you would simply just close this. Assignment start date, always, always, always hire date, and continue. Schedule, you always have to have a schedule put in for the employee. There is no scenario where an employee doesn't need a schedule or where I would simply click cancel on this. They're rounding for their time, their lunch rules, different items are calculated from their schedule, from how their schedule is set up. Even though in the window I can see 0011 all the way through, that's not really been selected. It's just a clear window inside, and that's the first one in there. Until I physically click on one of these, nothing is selected. And you see how it comes up here. Now it's selected, but only for Sunday because that's all I did. I come down and select department, job, anything that you may need to add to them as a default for each day they work. You would set that up. Most people only have department. Some have department and job. Others may have more. TA100 is going to only offer 2 categories, whereas Genesis will offer up to 5. So I've got this set up right here. I've got him set on this schedule. That's what he's going to do Monday through Friday. And you're asking, well, why did I set up Sunday? It needs to have something in here. Anytime the employee may work overnight or there's a question, it's going to look back to the prior day. So you need to set up from Sunday to Saturday. Even though this that I selected was, well, what did I put in here? Let's say 2 p.m. to 10:30. That has no bearing on the time the employee can clock in what day they can clock in or out. This simply means that if they do happen to clock in, they're going to get the specific attributes from this shift, the length of their lunch, whether it's an automatic lunch deduct, 8-hour shift. If they're early or late, it's going to define it based on the start and stop time. If none of that matters, that's fine. A lot of people simply use a flex shift for here, which you see now everything's gone. It's up to whatever your company utilizes the most. But I set up Sunday. I don't select this box. I click here, update forward, and now everything is transferred for the rest of the week. If I want to know if an employee is absent when they're scheduled to work, then I need to tell the system what days they work on. You don't have to put this in here. You need the shift, but really below you don't need anything. If you're doing job costing and you need to see reports based on the department they're assigned to, then yes, you need to have the department selected. But if you're not looking at absence, if you're not worried about holiday rules saying they got to work the day before and the day after the holiday, you don't need these in. But you do have to have these up here at a minimum. So I put that in, I click OK. Messages. Only certain clocks will do messaging. When in doubt, you can simply click all clocks, default message to name, and OK. Now you're set up. The clock may or may not do messaging, but if it does, you've got it prepared and it will send their name that when they clock in, their name would pop up on the screen. So that's set. We simply close it. Wage assignment. We want to decide whether they're hourly or salary. And if they're salary, are they going to be clocking in and we want their actual? Or do we want to show their scheduled hours that we selected? And on that schedule would have been imperative that the days of the week be checked so it knows to report the exact schedule that we just applied to it. Paired punching or ins only, outs only, whether they get paid overtime or not. Most people do not utilize salary, but it's there should you need to. For our purposes, we're going to put hourly. If I want to assign that person a wage that I can then run reports on and get numbers based on wages and hours, I'm going to select use a global wage. The option is there also to use a departmental wage if it's set up in the software. I could just leave this alone and click department, go down and select a department and give him a rate. I click outside that box and boom, it's going to be moving forward. Whenever he works in this department, that's the rate he's making. I can go down to installation, click there, click outside, it's going to update forward. And that's what rate this employee will make if he's working in this department. And if the change is made either at the clock or by a supervisor in the software to determine departments worked. So you can do departmental rates based on that. Most people are just going to use hourly or not at all. When I have use a global wage selected, I click add. I'll put their hire date in here, their wage. A charge rate is if you bill someone else for this employee's hours. So maybe I pay the employee $16.23 an hour, but I'm billing someone $23.56 an hour for this employee's labor. So most people do not use the charge rate. I just click OK. That looks good, and I click OK. Next is my badge. This is the number they're going to be using at the clock, whether it's a card, whether they're a biometric user and you're using the last four of their birthday, phone number, social, however you do that up. This is where you add that in. And we click here. Box is valid. The date. This is more for Genesis, for access and access control. I click OK. There we go. It didn't give me an error. It didn't come up and tell me that badge was assigned to anybody else. So I can go ahead and click close. Profiles. TA100 is not going to have profiles. And this is really a different subject, but profiles can be created, sent to the clock to keep employees from clocking during certain times, you just choose which profiles from which clock and things like that. You'll be able to look in other employees' profile screen if you utilize this and see what they've been given to determine what you should put in. So on this case for the profiles, I'm just going to close. And that brings us back here. Now, the only other tab that would normally open up before it dumped you back to the details would be the clocks tab. And only if you have biometric readers, finger readers, face reader, hand reader. And it would give you the opportunity to assign a clock to the employee at that time. And with only one clock being assigned to them, that's the only clock that realistically the employee would be able to use. So that's the only other area. But if you do not have biometrics, then this is not something that you would be utilizing. So that ends our video on employee maintenance. I hope it helps. And thank you for choosing Primetime.